Okay, good morning, everybody. It's a little bit after 11 o'clock. And I don't know what the right word is, for technical reasons or for some reason, rather than me sitting in 770 or standing in 770, I'm sitting in my basement. The Shurim and Beis Medrash and Nashim Abonis have been going on for over 25 years or longer. And there's a special chashivas, special unique place to having the classes in Beis Chayenu. Mipnei Sibis Shoinis, maybe you could add the word Mishunis for various reasons. Obviously, since the quarantine, we haven't been getting the regular crowds because people are afraid to come to shul and so on. And then there are other factors that are contributing. So today's class could not have been given in 770. So at first there was a thought to cancel the class, and then we said, listen, we're doing the Beis Habchira Zoom also, so let's do the Maimer Zoom also. In the meantime, I can see that I am 100% of the attendance. So in Beis Medrash, L'Noshim Abonis 770, I'm talking to myself. But I'm also being broadcast on my website, InsideChasidus.org live, as well as the Facebook page of Inside Chasidus, as well as the YouTube page of Inside Chasidus. So we're learning a Maimer. Without any further ado, I'm going to get to the Maimer. Now, if you know the truth is, let me send the Maimer to my Facebook page, okay? The Maimer is available. If you're going to join this Zoom, I put it in the chat. I'm just going to get up for 1 minute. I'm going to send this Maimer that I'm teaching right now to my Facebook audience, okay? 1 second. Okay, I just sent the Maimer to my Facebook audience. So if you're listening to me on Facebook, you can actually open up the Maimer and follow inside. Here we go. Not going to waste any more time. Rabbi Sai, for those of us who are members of Beis Medrash and Noshim Abonis, you know that we try to do a year of the Rebbe's Maimorim per year. And we've gone backwards. I just love to say this. Since we started the Maimer series, we did every single Maimer of the Rebbe, from the Nala, from Memtes, just a few Maimorim of those years, Memches, Mem Zayin, Mem Vav, Mem Hey, Mem Dalet, Mem Gimel, Mem Beis, Mem Aleph, Mem Lametes. That's 11 years, or 10 years. And we're doing Lamet Ches, 1978. We started around Yud Kislev, and by this coming Yud Kislev, which is sooner rather than later, we will have completed 11 years of Maimon from the Rebbe without missing a single one. It's one of the things that gives me the greatest joy, that we teach the Rebbe's Torah, the Rebbe's Maimorim. And oftentimes we see that a Maimer of the Rebbe that looks quite innocuous, looks very, very much like the Maimer of the Rebbe before on whom he is basing his Maimer. There is a spin or a modification or an adaptation or a change or an addition, which often changes the pshat and the maimer substantially, and sometimes minakatz alakotz. It's very exciting to learn Mamarim of the Rebbe. Now, today is Erev Shabbos Kedish Pashas Matas Umaseh. Shabbos V'Vachim Chedish Menachem. The maimer we're learning is from Bolak. We're a little bit behind, but I intend on catching up because Between now and Rosh Hashanah, we have, I think, 6 Maimorim to learn, or 7 Maimorim to learn, and we don't have that many Fridays. I may have to crunch a little bit towards the end, but I think I'm a little bit behind, but we're going to catch up and we're going to go ahead. As it turns out, this particular Maimed, even though it's a Maimed of Bolok, as you can see, it was Shivasa B'Tammuz. And the Rebbe does talk about the 9 days and the 3 weeks in this Maimed. He makes reference to it. Because at the end of the Maimed, he speaks about the Friedrich Rebbe's Pasuk from the Kapitel. And in so doing, he mentions Tzion b'Mishpati Pada v'Shaveh b'Staka. So the Maimed is also relevant, or has a connection to the 3 weeks, the Bein HaMitzarim. How do I say it? This Maimed is a typical Maimed of the Rebbe. It's a typical Maimed of the Rebbe. How so? Well, there are higher worlds, there are higher worlds, and there are higher worlds. Yeah. But the most important thing is to bring everything down. And in order to bring everything down, you have to go higher than high. It's a classic idea in the Rebbe's. It's a classic idea in Hasidus. But our Rebbe's whole business, the Rebbe's ganze Metzias, is Lasses Leis Barach Diri B'Tachtonim, is to affect a change in the world. And this Maimed, like so many others, speaks about, look at how the Maimed begins. Marosh Tzurim, voice from very high levels, but that it comes down into the very, very lowest levels. Moreover, in order to come down from the highest levels to the lowest levels, it has to go even higher. The Maimed, as you can see, is 7 pages long, 6 pages and a little bit, which is not as long as most of the Maimonim from Lamed Ches that we've been learning recently. But it's still longer than the Maimonim that we're used to from the Mems. Of this entire Maimed, there's 1 page, I would say Sif Gimel, the bottom of Shinai Beis till the top of Shinai Daled, maybe something like that, which are more difficult, which I'm going to skip. I'm not going to teach them. I reserve the right to give a second class where I will do a much more scholarly exposition, where I will go into Barichas, this whole question of Oisius, which is the conversation that the Rebbe has in that piece of Maimed. But today I intend on learning most of this Maimed, like I said before, with the exception of that shtikela about Oisius, which is a little bit more involved. And so I'm going to start. Okay, start from the beginning. We're going to go in order. And as always, if you're following me from the text, everything is numbered. It's 1 through 14. 14 is the Sif Gimel that I mentioned. Otherwise, everything goes in order. 1 through 13 is the Maimed in order minus Peri Gimel. Here we go. It says in the Nevuah of Bilam. Right, let's give background. Bilam was a Goya Rasha. But the Chazal say that it's possible that his Nevuah was higher than Moshe Rabbeinu's. And of course the question is, how could anybody's Nevuah be higher than Moshe Rabbeinu's? And one of the many terutzim is, Bilam HaRasha's Nevuah, the Madreg of his Nevuah wasn't higher than the Moshe Rabbeinu. But the Madreg of his Neviasin, what Hashem revealed through him, he didn't even reveal through Moshe Rabbeinu. And of course, remember, the entire Nevuah of Bilam is really a Nevuah of Moshe. Because there was no roving reporter in the year 2448 that wandered out of the Jewish camp into to the Nachal Arnein and encountered Balak beseeching Bilam to curse the Jewish people so that they shouldn't be a threat to his nation. All the Gemara Chazal say, they never spoke about this, that Moshe Rabbeinu Kosev Sifrei Uparashas Bilam, the Nevuah of Bilam is really Moshe Rabbeinu saying a prophecy about what Bilam prophesied about. And there are 4 of them, right? There's 4 of them. The first 2 are a sequence. Balak calls Bilam to curse the Jewish people, and Bilam goes back into their past. He starts talking about our ancestors. The second one, he starts talking about us, how Hashem chose us, and took us out of Egypt, and has a special relationship with us. The third one is a bit different, because like Rashi says, he wants to bring an ayin hara into the Jewish people by speaking about their sins, and that also turns around, and he says, amongst other things. And of course, the last Nevuah of Bilam is B'klal, a different kind of thing. Bilam is not even trying to curse the Jewish people. He's not trying to speak an ayin hara about the Jewish people. He's actually saying incredibly great things about the Jewish people. It's only that he says, or which means Bilam is saying to Balak, don't worry. The Jewish people's greatness is not going to be till the end of time. And when the end of time happens, you and I will be long dead, so we won't have to, quote, suffer the success, the grandeur of the Jewish people. So there's four Nevi'as. Like I said, two are in a sequence, where Bilam is speaking about our past and our present in terms of Hashem's favoritism to us. The third is Bilam trying to be machnes and ayin hara by speaking about Jewish sin and how that gets turned around. And the last is Bilam not even trying, he's just simply saying to Balak, the Jews are going to be great, but not today. Le'ata le'kodav, in a very far time into the future, and you don't care about the future. That's the four nevuas. This is a pasuk from the very first nevuah, where he goes back into the past. Min aram yancheni balak merachmei avlacha that kaval leyankev lecha zayim yisrael mo ekel lekavakel me'ezem lazashem timireish tzurim. That's how it goes, right? This is the beginning of the first of the four prophecies of Bilam, who says the nicest thing about the Jewish people that anybody ever said. And here's one of the psukim: timireish tzurim erenu. I see that they come from reish tzurim, from their head of rock. And they are also means uplifted, or the Rebbe is going to explain this moment. Their direction, their motion has to do with hills. And then the Psukim goes on to say all kinds of wonderful things about the Jewish people. Hein am lavadad yishken, we're a nation that sits alone. It actually explains this, that whenever lahavdul the goyim we live amongst are blessed, we join in their blessing, and then we have our own blessing about goyim la yischashu. And it finishes the Yisrael Oisachayil. These words, Yisrael Oisachayil, are from the last Nevuah, from the Nevuah of Ba'achritz Hayamim, but the Rebbe puts them together. Va'pirush bazeh, the meaning of this pasuk, that Bilam Marosh identifies the greatness of the Jewish people. Mereish Tzurim u'Mugvois, K'pish Ermeivi, Rashi B'Shalatei, Rashi brings it in the Chumash, skip to the next line, is based on the Tanchuma, and Kama Medrashim, and Azeh. 5 lines into the paragraph, Shemereish Tzurim Kayala Ovis, Reish Tzurim, the head rock goes on the 3 Ovis. Umagvois, and hills call Hayimois. That Reish Tzurim Asher Mgvois, Mireish Tzurim Erenu Mgvois Asher means that the Navi Bilam sees the great ancestry of the Jewish people as a Shmir, our source. Umefarish, Rashi, Pirush HaKosu B'divrei Bilam, Rashi interprets the words of Bilam. Ani mistakel b'rasheim. I look at their head, u'batchilas sharasheim, at the beginning of their root, where they took root. Ani reya esam, and I see them yusadim v'chazakim, founded and fortified. Bit surim agvoyis halalu, with these rocks and mountains. Aydei avos v'imois, fathers and mothers. In other words, our roots are very, very good. Now, if you'll notice, if you have my text, I circled one letter in this line, 8 lines in. It should say bit surim ugvois halalu or meet surim ugvois. It says kit surim, which means, as the Rebbe is going to explain in a moment, that it's not just that we have great ancestry, but that all of the gifts of our ancestry have come over to us. Keep reading. This means 2 things. First of all, the Ovis and the patriarchs and matriarchs are founded, have a good foundation, have a lot of strength. Like a rock that's fixed in a heart, in its place. In addition to the fact that we come from good ancestry, from good pedigree. Since, whereas the Tzurim and the Gvois are the fathers and mothers of all the Jewish people, I'll call there is called full time. And the movement is therefore understood, all the character traits and all of the aspects, which existed by the rock and the mountain, our fathers and our mothers, says the Rebbe. It's not just that we have a good source, but that the good source is in us. Is drawn into each man and woman of Israel. In a way that's an inheritance from our fathers and our mothers. Yes, that it should be that Hayorishim also the heirs. That means us, because we come from the Tzurim Agvois. That Sheklalusam, who I just reading the last words of the paragraph, Miyusadim Bechazah. So the first title of the pasuk Mireish Tzurim Adenim Gvois Hashem means that our ancestry is great. And the second type of Marosh Tzurim and Marosh Tzurim means that because our ancestry is great, that ancestry is in us. So that's the meaning of the word. That Yidden also, all the gifts that the Ovis and the Imais were given, Yidden possess. The Rebbe continues the Indians and this idea that not only Yidden come from good roots, but the good roots are in them. Is Mitechas Bar Lakach. It explains the fact that Bilam Harasha laments, observes and laments. She'etzel b'nei Yisrael, when it comes to Jewish people, Lo yochel liyas inyan acher milvad inyan bracha. There can nothing can come to them except blessing. Bilam Harasha Yedei Uragov. He knows Hashem's time, and he's mechashev. He tries to find the moment of Hashem's anger and to curse at that instant. That's Bilam's whole chokhmah. That's his ksima. That's his trick. And Veistach, the Eibishter was loy nisragis, niskas, kol hayom malolu. The Eibishter changes the rules for the Jewish people, and Bilam observes. Maybe he wasn't happy about it, but he nevertheless asserts it, that with these people, you can't do anything but bless them. They're a blessed people. Why? Meaning to say, not only they come from a great source, but whatever brachas the source has, they also possess. Even when you're looking on the edge of the people. The says, what is the meaning of the words Yamisham Kteyah? It's talking about those Jews outside the clouds. In other words, Balak Harasha takes Bilam Harasha to a place, state safe, but they see only a few Yidden. Kteyah, that means, so to speak, the worst of the Jewish people. No, and you're looking at the worst of the Jewish people, you think now you can curse them even by looking at Kseha'am, at the worst of the Jewish people, which means those Jews who the clouds, so to speak, spit out. All Bilam could do was give brachas. Moreover, Vakasha Yoshes al Midbar Ponav, and Bilam tries to look towards the desert, which means he's trying to bring an evil eye to the Jewish people by reminding the Eibush of the Chata Ego. He couldn't touch them. And the Rebbe says in Yidden, to touch the Jewish people, but to the contrary, all he can do is give brachas. All of the blessings the Jewish people had already received. Aid be'esis man at that point. Hachel, which begins the first blessing, which is the bracha of El Mitzayim Mitzrayim, which is the pasuk before. Right, this is Pasha Seinu. No, I think this pasuk is in the next Pedic. It's in Pedic Tes, but I could be wrong. So Kel Mitzim Mitzrayim is a part of the third bracha, right? Marosh Tzurim is part of the first bracha. Kel Mitzim Mitzrayim is connected to the bracha that he said along with Matoivu, right? So the Yidden already then were fortified with the bracha going out of Mitzrayim. And moreover, so already then the Jewish people had considerable bracha. Then we continue. There were brachas that would follow later on. Top of page Shin Ayin Beis Ad LeBracha Tzuba B'Yesod, the greatest of all blessings, which is the bracha Shatiyah B'Achas Hayomim at the end of time. Shenemra Eid B'Yom Mehem Beifin Shal Nevuah, that Bilam already would say a few psukim later in the next page. The prophecies about the infant Mashiach. So says the Rebbe, what is Bilam observing? That the Jewish people have great ancestry. The greatness of their ancestry is inside of them. They have those greatnesses. And as a result, all they can get is brachas. Opposite of brachas have no connection to Jews. And the Rebbe says there were brachas that they had already received, there were brachas that they were soon to receive, and the brachas that we're going to receive much later on, including the bracha of Mashiach. And the Rebbe continues, we know that when Hashem speaks, it's like an action. And of course, we also know that the words of the prophet are the words of God, as you know the whole Vart. That when a Navi speaks, it's as if Hashem is speaking. Before the Navi says the words of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, when Hashem tells the prophet to speak something, and the prophet doesn't say it, it's called Liba, Lepuma, Loy Galia. This is an expression in the Gemara. The heart to the mouth has not been revealed. And so long as the heart to the mouth has not been revealed, there's a possibility for the prophecy to change. But when the prophet actually says the words, he's the mouth of Hashem, so it comes into the world. And the klal is that when it comes to a prophecy that's very positive, the nevuah will never change. It'll be forever. It's never going to change. So the prophet speaking is Hashem speaking. That's why it's such a terrible aveda when a Navi is Kavish Nevuah, say when a prophet suppresses his prophecy because by him not speaking, the words of Hashem don't come into the world. And there's a long story with the Alter Rebbe and the Dibuk, where the Alter Rebbe said that there was a Navi Zechariah who had to say the worst Nevuah, but Yidden didn't want to say it. So the Yidden had Rachmonus on him in quotations, and they murdered him. So he shouldn't have to say his Nevuah. And of course, the Alter Rebbe said this pshat to be Malamed Chus on a Dibuk, which was possessed, which was embedded in the person who was alive during the Alter Rebbe's times, thousands of years after the murder of Zechariah, and the Dibuk had an aliyah. So when a Navi speaks, it's called Liba Lapuma Galitz Hashem's words. So when Bilam Arasha said the words, as well as all the other brachas, the bracha Kel Mitzrayim Mitzrayim, and go and get the Eretz Yisrael, says the Rebbe Nimtza, thus, Bizman Amiras Hanavu, from the moment this prophecy was spoken, it's already the beginning of the coming of Mashiach Tzidkenu, Im Kol HaPratim, including all the details, Shenimnu B'Nevuah that are enumerated in this prophecy, Ad Ba'ofen Shel Ma'aser, and 11 words actually actual. So from the moment Bilam says, Marosh Tzurim Adenu, Mavois Asherenu, he's saying that every Yid not only comes from Heilige Zaydis and Babas, holy grandfathers and grandmothers, but every bracha that the Zayd and the Baba had, every Yid has, as well as the bracha of Yitzias Mitzrayim and going into Yisrael, and ultimately the bracha of Achris HaYamim. And once Hashem says it, and the Navi acts as Hashem's mouth to reveal it, it's already in the world on a level of mice. No, so where's Mashiach? So the Rebbe says, Ella, I'm reading number 4. Sharat HaKadosh Baruch Hu Deibishter wants that even though he already brought into the world all of these phenomena, through his prophet speaking these words, he wanted Shalach, and he said that subsequent to that, Yakeli Sheisim Lamata, we should make a vessel from below. Kedelakabel Barachazu, to receive these blessings. Be'efen, in such a way, Shatar B'milu B'Shlemusa, should shine fully and wholly. V'acha Barachatis Achadam Akeli, until that there should be a unity between the blessing and the vessel itself, like Eid and Keli. And the Rebbe concludes, Shakol Havtachas Eli Yikum B'Kar of Mamish B'Beis Mashiach Tzidkenu. In other words, the reason the Eibishter prolongs the Golus Rachman al-Islam, it causes Yidden to go through so much until the brachas are fully realized, is because we should make a keli. Because when we make a keli, the brachas that the Eibishter gave us are fully manifest and fully revealed and fully internalized, because we, in quotes, earned them. But from Hashem's point of view, the brachas were already given through the Nevi'im. Through Hashem's point of view, once the Nevi'im spoke, the brachas were given even on a level of action, and he delays Kvayochel, his galus, so we should make kelim for it. Later on in the Maimed, on page Shinai and Vov, the Rebbe is going to say Lecheda something different. That Ilu Zocho Kayemes Miyad. I think it's a bit of a contradiction. But here the Rebbe says that the moment the Navi speaks these in Yonim, they exist actually, and the delay is that we should make a keli for it. So in this pasuk Marosh Tzurim, the Navi describes where Yidden come from and what koiches Yidden have. Now, what's the bracha in that? What's the bracha in having Helik Zaydas? What's the bracha of having all the gifts that your Zaydah has in you? What's the bracha? So Rebbe Posh is going to explain it to us al pi Kabbalah. In other words, not how the bracha of Marosh Tzurim and Megvois is a hakdama to some other bracha. But the Marosh Tzurim and Megvois is a bracha in itself. What is this bracha? We know that the Jewish people start out in the thought of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And of course, in Chassidus it's explained it means the highest level of Hashem's thought. And it's understood whatever we have down here in this world, including the brachas of Marosh Tzurim and Megvois. They descended as the Jewish people are rooted in Eibishter's thought, so to speak, on high. Which means, of course, Sfiris, Halyenis, the supernal Sfiris. And then it comes down from there to us down here. Says the Rebbe, what I mean to say is this: that in addition to the Gashmi, is the meanings of Marosh Tzurim and Megvois, that have holy grandfathers and grandmothers, and we inherited their miles. There is also the Ruchni Yizdikim Marosh Tzurim, and there's also the Ruchni Yizdikim Begvois. Shayin, the Marosh Tzurim Arenu Gvois Asherenu, these two brachas of Reish Tzurim and Gvois, which means Avis and Imais. Yeshne Gambi Knesset Yisrael Maila, the Jewish people have it the way it is on high, which is called Knesset Yisrael. Knesset Yisrael is Malchus, Sfiras HaMalchus, Shakelel is Kol HaNeshamot, which includes all souls. So, just like down here, there's a bracha of Reish Tzurim and Gvois in Malchus HaBatzilus, which is the collective of all Jewish souls, called Knesset Yisrael. You also have Reish Tzurim and Gvois. And he continues, why is Malchus HaBatzilus, which is the source of all Jewish neshamas, called Knesset, the collection of Jewish souls? It's Al Shem Shemekabeles Mi Yisrael, because they receive from Yisrael. I wrote on the margin Yisrael de Liela, but I'm not sure if that's correct. Knesset Yisrael receives from Yisrael. Knesset means knesses, like the word basic knesses. It gathers, it collects, it takes in. Knesset means it collects Yisrael, all the Yadim from Yisrael, which is Zoh, which is a higher level, and brings them into Malchus. And the Rebbe says that when Shisha Midas, that Zoh is the 6 Midas. And he brings from a Maimon from the Rebbe Rashab from Kabbalah that the 6 Midas represent the 600,000 Jews. Says the Rebbe, if you want, if there's a pasuk which Bilam Marosh is saying, which is certainly a bracha, again, not a prelude to a bracha, but a bracha in itself. What's the bracha? Says the Rebbe. Let's go back to the beginning. Let's not talk about Jews as they are physically. Let's talk about Jews as they are in their source, which is Malchus HaBatzilus, which is called Knesset Yisrael, because it's miskabel from the Midas HaBatzilus. And where do the Midas HaBatzilus and Malchus HaBatzilus get their light from, their energy from, their light from? From Chochmah and Bina. Ushneyem, and both of them are Knesset Yisrael v'Yisrael. Malchus v'Zoh, and they love them Abba v'Ima, come from Chochmah and Bina, which is Reish Tzurim and Gvois. The Avis are Chochmah, and their Mois are Bina, and then the Rebbe says, this says in Zayar, and in the Alter Rebbe, and the Mittler Rebbe, and the Tzemach Tzedek. And that's the bracha Ki Reish Tzurim. That the Yidden in their Shoydish are called Knesset Yisrael because there's a collection of all Jewish neshama in one place. But they're also called Knesset Yisrael because they receive from the 6 Midas of Zoh. That's why they're in the number of 600,000. And where does Zoh, Knesset Yisrael, the Midas of Zoh, and Malchus, Knesset Yisrael and Knesset Yisrael, get its highest from Chochmah Bina as Reish Tzurim and Megvois. Says the Rebbe, what the Rebbe says is not what the Rebbe is saying, but what I'm trying to explain to us is that the bracha of Reish Tzurim and Gvois is even higher than the Shadish of Yidden. The Shadish of Yidden bepashtus is Malchus, Knesset Yisrael, which we see from Yisrael, which is Zoh. Yidden have a bracha even higher than that, which is Chochmah Bina Reish Tzurim. Now in Perek Gimel, which I'm now going to give, the Rebbe tries explaining what Reish Tzurim and Megvois means. And in short, what the Rebbe says is that Chochmah and Bina have the Midas, have what comes after it, in a hidden way. In Chochmah it's more hidden, in Bina it's less hidden, but in both of them it's hidden. And from the way it's hidden in Chochmah Bina, it comes down into Midas, and then it comes down into Malchus. That's what the Rebbe is going to explain in the paragraph that I'm skipping. And the Rebbe chooses, Mipnei Siba, I don't know what the Siba is, but the Rebbe chooses to use a mashal to help understand the descent from Reish Tzurim, which is Chochmah, to Gvois, which is Bina, to Yisrael, which is Zoh, to Knesset Yisrael, which is Malchus. Until it comes out into this world, he's going to use the mashal dafke of oisius, of letters or words. And I'm skipping this whole shtickle, okay? But to say it in short, what did we just do? We started off by saying that the Jewish people come from good pedigree, from Heilig Hazedis. We continued by saying that we don't only come from good pedigree, we are good pedigree. Whatever brachas the Avis have, we also have. Then we said that all of these brachas are not just Gashmiistic brachas, they exist also in Sfiris Lamailo, because Yisrael Lalo b'machshava. And in Sfiris it's Chochmah and Bina Vatzilus. So Reish Tzurim Eren Megvois Asher means that Yidden have a Shadish and Chochmah Bina Vatzilus, which comes down even into the way the Neshamas Yisrael Alamat. Okay? That's the brach. Now I'm skipping page Shinai and Beis. I'm going to the bottom of page Shinai and Gimel. I'm going to be candid with you. I'm not going to learn this properly. Because the only way to learn number 6 properly is to explain number 14, which I'm not learning. So I'm just going to skim it to make a point. V'hine, afapisha chochme l'mayla mibina. We're learning a maimed that's explaining a pasuk. What does the pasuk say? That Yidden are special not only lamata, Yidden are special l'mayla in their shadish. Yidden are not only special l'mayla in their shadish, which is malchus and zah, they're special in the shadish of the shadish, which is chochma and bina. And chochma is higher than bina. Says the Rebbe, chochma is of course greater than bina, but yesh ma'ile b'bina. There's something about bina which is greater than chochma. You know what that is? Skip the parenthesis. Shadavka ayod nasas am shachal amata. Bina is lower than chochma. It brings everything down. Now down means less. Down means less. Down means lower. But down is the point. Bringing the Eibusha to the lowest world for Yochel involves a tremendous reduction in Elokus, but it also involves maximum chiddush. You know, the famous Hasidic word on the papagay, right? On the parrot. That when a parrot parrots divrei Adam, it has a greater impression on the king than when the Adam is medaber divrei Adam. And the nimshal is in the shamas in this world, especially in the last generations, are like parrots compared to earlier generations, compared to neshamas lamayla. And we give the Eibusha the greatest chiddush precisely because we're parrots. So even though, of course, Elokus on a higher level is in a more precise state than Elokus on a lower level, but in terms of fulfilling the purpose, it's the deepest thing to bring the Eibusha to the lowest level. And that's the whole vort of Chassidus, that it's not about what happens up there, it's what happens down here. And therefore, says Rebbe, Bina has a mile over Chochmah. And of course, what's going to follow is that the Midas have a mile over Bina, and Malchus has a mile over Zah, and so on. So on the one hand, we say that higher is better. On the other hand, to bring from higher to lower is better still. No, it's better still. I always tell you the same several verter as illustrations for this point. One of them is a vart. There was a woman, a person, who did a handwriting analysis of the Rebbe Maharash. I have it someplace in my computer saved. Of the Rebbe Maharash. I don't know why on the Rebbe Maharash, but did a handwriting analysis of the Rebbe Maharash. And they describe how extraordinary a personality this person is. You know, there's a letter from the Rebbe written to Shazad about the one who did the handwriting analysis of the Alter Rebbe. And he says to Shazad, if you wouldn't have told me yourself, I would never believe that the person who did this analysis didn't know who the Alter Rebbe was, because the analysis is unbelievable. And he speaks Moedin Kamailas, going back to our Rebbe, Marash. And one of the among things he says is that his heads are in the clouds. But everything is carried through to the lowest level. You know, people who are great in their mind and in their soul tend to be above the world. And it's a holy life, it's a good life. But the point is to bring what is above down. That's a Rebbe. Shleimus. Shleimus is not how high he is. Shleimus is that in addition to being so high, he brings everything till tachtan she'ein tachtan lamata himen. So when we speak about Neshamas Yisrael, and we say they have every brach, and we say let's go to the Shadish of Neshamas Yisrael, and let's go to the Shadish of the Shadish of Neshamas Yisrael, and say they have every brach. And of course, Chochmah is higher than Bina, so Chochmah is a greater bracha than Bina. But the point, ultimately, is to bring down from that Shadish HaShadoshim down here, and therefore Bina has a mile over Chochmah. The whole idea of Bina is to step outside, which is the translation of the word Gvais Ashurena. Bina means to step outside. Now, of course, Ashurena means to see, like also means to see. So Marosh Tzurim Erenu, Magvais Ashurenu both mean to see, but there's a different type in the word Ashurenu, which means to step outside. Okay, Kfishi Bebina Atmo, Kfisha Midas Haim Bebina Gufa, Ulachan Azel his Galas Hamidis, Vadlam Shacham Esviras Hamas. It's true that a higher is greater, but the ability to bring the high to the low is greater than great. And that's the mile of the lower spheres over the higher spheres that they bring godliness down. And he gives you a dogma for this. For example, which is Avraham. We find Berget Avraham Avinu that says Chassidus befedish. That in order for Avraham Avinu was an incredible intellectual, and he understood Chochmas of Elokus. He came to the conclusion that there's an Eibishter after 40 or 48 years of desperate and obsessive search and struggle to find Emes, Avraham Avinu. And then, of course, once Avraham Avinu had his own theological truth, He made it his business to share it with the entire world. He didn't keep it a secret. Avraham Avinu. Yeah? Says the Rebbe that it says in Hasidus. Kadesh Tiyashpa Lamata for Avraham Avinu, who was this unbelievable chach, to come into the world and give what he had to others. Hey, they gave him the letter Hey, which is the letter of Bina, like it says in Teireh. What does it say in Teireh? There's an Inyan of Avram. Avraham by itself, without the Hey, means Avram. The Av means Chochma, Ram means removed, which is Seichel and Elam Mikarai, and how Avram is so smart, he can't talk to anybody. Avram is such a genius, he has no ability to take the wisdom that he has about Elokus and bring it to the world. However, Avraham, they gave him a letter Hey, which makes him even greater. But the expression of the extra greatness was not that he was even higher, but that he was able to bring things lower. That brings godliness all the way to the lowest levels. That from Avraham's Chochem, it comes then into the Tzurim, which is the 6 Midas and Malchus. Yisrael Kassis Yisrael, Bizin, Shamas Yisrael, Fishahem Lamat. So the Rebbe says, on the one hand, Reish Tzurim and Gevois is higher than Yisrael and Kassis Yisrael, and it's certainly lower than Yisrael de Latata, but on the other hand, bringing down from there to here is the ultimate point. And that's also included in the words Reish Tzurim and Gevois, not just that our sources of the Aves Avram, and which means Chochma and Bina, but how that imshach into this world. However, in order for the Aves and the Imois, which represent Chochma, Bina, Vasilis, to step out of their place and to come down to our level, they also need a koyach to bring them from a higher level to a lower level. And just like by Avram, they added the Hey, Avraham, to be able to be Mamshech Lamata, the Rebbe is now going to say that they took the word Gvo'os, which is naturally spelled without a Vav, which can be read as Givas, one mountain. And they added a Vav, which makes it Gvo'os Lashon Rabim, which brings Elokus Mamayla Lamata. So just like in the word Avram, the Hey gives Avram a higher kech to be brought lower. In this Parsha, it says Gvois without a Vav, and when you add the Vav to Gvois, it gives a koyach to the Gvois, which means Bina. The Imai is to bring Elokus from the highest levels to the lowest. Says the Rebbe, Loi must be in the Givas Chosevav. You can't have Gvois without a Vav. Like it's in Mesifta de L'Yela. But you have to add Gvois, El Tzarech L'Yidavka Gvois, Mole, Vav, and there's Mesifta de L'Kiyah. So there's two yeshivas. Mesifta de L'Yela is a higher yeshiva, and Mesifta de L'Kiyah is a lower yeshiva. The higher yeshiva, Mesifta de L'Yela, Gvois is without a Vav. Mesifta de L'Kiyah, which is the lower level, Gvois with a Vav, and Daf, when you add the Vav, it brings it down into this world. Which is Lashon Rabba. But it's nicht a beifin shal yochid. Skip a line. But l'chein tzarech liyis givois maliva. You have to add a vav, which is Lashon Rabba begilu l'heidus shnim shechlamata gam inyan amalchos. It comes down to the lowest worlds. So in the pasuk, kimereish tzurim and gvois with an extra vav ashurenu, it's not just teaching us that the source of the Avis and the Imois is very high, Chochma and Bina, but it comes all the way down to us. And he concludes. The idea that the greatness of the greatness of the biggest tzaddikim is not how high they are, but how whatever height they're on comes down to the lowest world is Negel to Mashiach. The Rebbe brings in the bracket because everything leads to Mashiach. Skip the whole bracket, 5 lines into the paragraph in the middle of the line. When you have the Gvois with a Vav, or Avraham with a Hey, which brings godliness down from a higher level to a lower level, ultimately Zechet to Mashiach Tzidkenu, says the Rebbe is a Gelul Kam. That includes as well the Ibur, the Nishmas Malka Mashiach, the Ibur, the pregnancy of the Neshama of Melcha Mashiach. So the highest levels don't yet account for the Ibur of Nishmas Melcha Mashiach. The idea that the highest levels are brought to the lowest levels does account for the Ibur of the Neshama of Melech HaMashiach. Why? I'm not sure, but this is what the Rebbe says in the mind. And of course, the word Ibur is a bit of a throw-off, because Ibur means a secondary manifestation, but I guess in this case, Ibur means the beginning of the conception of Melech HaMashiach's Neshama. Good. So the point is simple, that a higher level is lower than a lower level. Bringing the higher level down to the lowest levels is even higher than that, including the Mashiach. And the Rebbe connected to a pasuk. Then it says in the pasuk, "Asapra el choik." I will relate to the choik. To the choik means the law. You'll see later the choik means malchus. And the Shem Omer Alai, God says to me, "B'niyata, you're my son. Ani I Hayem this day Yiladicha gave birth to you. This is a pasuk which deals with a Mashiach, and in Tilim it's in Kapitel Beis. Okay. Hainu Shakadosh Baruch Hu Mashiach Wadav Hashem says to Mashiach Sidkein Bniyata, you're my son. Ani Hayem Yiladich, that your birth comes from Ani. Ani Dafka Al Derech Amalul Ben Yelin Yin Asias Shashar Shemei Chochma Adlat Manefesh. Ani, which means Dafka Chochma Vatzils Dafka Atmos and Musas the Kech for the birth of the Neshama Melech HaMashiach. Avo, however, the idea that the Neshama of Melech HaMashiach is introduced to the world with the Koyach Avani is a seminal one, is a hidden one. That Mashiach shouldn't just be conceived, but he should actually be born and be manifest in the world. Hashem has to do a seeper with chayk. So Mashiach's coming into the world because the Eibush says Ani Hayem Yiladicha Atzmos Amhus gives birth to Mashiach. What is actually coming into this world has to do with Asaper al Chayk. Because the Rebbe translates Asaper Chayk as follows: Shuteitzvus Hashpah Malchus. Key Chayk goes on Malchus. Because Malchus is the way of Chayk for two reasons. Number one, because it's very strong, and number two, because it's limited. Like the word Chayk is very strong, and Chayk is also limited, right? So El Sapra al Chayk, top of page Shinai and Hey now, means to shine, to illuminate, to add to Malchus of Atzilus. Miloshin Sapis, Sfiras of Behiras, Kimvor B'Derushim. Vasapra al Chayk, Hainu Teisves Hashpah Bebechinas Malchus, to add extra Hashpah in Malchus. And by adding extra Hashpah in Malchus, Malchus becomes a Keli for the idea of an Ayim Yiladichich. Just like we said before about adding the Hey to Avram, or adding the Vav to Gva Ois, gives extra Koyach. The idea of a Sapra al Chayk, the Eibush adding Koyach is to Malchus of Atzilus, gives an extra Koyach. There's Malchus and there's Zod, the unifying Malchus and Zod, the Keich which comes from Atzmos and Hus. This Keich from Atzmos is the Sapra al Chayk, enriches Malchus of Atzilus to make it a Keil. And then, when the Eibush shines light to Malchus to give it extra Koyach. To be Mamshech Lamat. Ozay Nasa Mashiach said, can then Mashiach comes away from the Ani and Hayem. Ani means Atmos was created, and Hayem means that he's fully revealed. Hayem Dafka, if it's Hayem Masalesh the Gilnus Chabay, and of course, that brings the other part of the Gilnus Chabach, which goes on Atmos to Chabay, is a tale like the Rebbe said in the Maim of Yibis Tammuz. This is the Maim before this one, where the Rebbe spoke about the idea of the Simcha of a Nes. And the Maskon is you're not celebrating the revelation of the Nes. You're not celebrating the greatness of the Nes, you're celebrating the Eibishter himself. So even though the Lashon HaPasuk is Zayim Asad Hashem Lagil Mitzchabah, you read it as if it would say Bach. Bach means Atzmos Amhus, but goes on the Chof Beis Eisa. By the way, this reference to Chof Beis Eisa here may explain why in the previous page, Kuf Shinayim Beis, he spoke so much about Eisa, but I don't know. The bottom line is that there is a concept of Avram being changed to Avraham. There's a concept of voice without a vav being changed to voice with a vav. And there's the idea of Ani Hayem Yiladicha, which is predicated on Asapra al Chayk. When we add to Malchus, then Mashiach is born b'peh. So what's the Nekud of the Maimon? The Nekud of the Maimon is that Enu v'lei Ata Asher Enu v'lei Kal. If you didn't have a very high source in Chacham Nabim, that was in the Emois. But more importantly, it doesn't remain in that high source that comes down into the world, to the lowest levels of the lowest worlds, as he illustrated from the word Avraham and the word Gva'ois, and the idea of Asapra al Chayk. That's it. That's more or less the Maimer, really. That's the Maimer, more or less. The Nekudim, right? So what do we say? There's high, and then there's higher. What's higher than high? Coming lower. Like the Rebbe said in Nun Beis, that the greatest aliyah that a neshama could have l'mayla is that it should be zeichet at tchiyas mesim, and tchiyas mesim should be nimshach lamata, and neshama v'guf. This is the kavanah sabriyah. So what's next? What's Pedic Hay? of the Maimed about? The answer is this. This is a Maimed that the Rebbe said right after Yud Beis Tammuz. Yeah? This is a Maimed of Shiva Tammuz. The Maimed of Yud Beis Tammuz of Lamed Ches was Hayim Asad Hashem Negil Zucha Boy. Like I told you before, the boy is changed into a boch in the Maimed. There's a Maimed that I didn't teach in Beis Medrash and Nashim Abanas. I taught it in the Yeshiva.net classes. Right? The Maimarim Online. It's another whole series that we have in Maimarim the Rebbe, because that's a Mugadik Maimed. In the meantime, I only gave the first class. I did not yet give the second class. I hope to give it ASAP, as soon as possible. But in that Maimed, the Rebbe also spoke about this idea, boy boch b'atzmuscha. And of course, the atzmus of the Eibishter is when it's nimshach lamata till into this world. Fana ma'asim mit Rebbe, by the way, which I've told you many times. That the Rebbe's mother herself related that the Rebbe was 18. The Rebbe was very reclusive. He's very to himself. He sat and learned in Daven, and he wasn't interested in the world. He didn't need the world. But there were a number of times where the Rebbe, so to speak, went out of his seclusion and got involved. And when he got involved wholeheartedly. One of those times when there was an epidemic, Rahman Rassan, of typhus, typhoid fever, and thousands of people got ill, many people died, and there was also a quarantine. They would isolate people who got the illness because it was very catchy. It was a contagion. So the Rebbe went around from bed to bed, helping the people who had this illness. You had to clean their tongue. It's apparently very, very painful and very unpleasant. And the Rebbe helped people, and then he got sick himself. So the Rebbe Tzimchana said that when the Rebbe was ill, he was fayochel in a state of delirium for a while. And when he was in a state of delirium, he was muttering, he was talking. The Rebbe was a teenager. If you would lean over and listen, what it was the Rebbe was muttering, the Rebbe's mother said this, was that he was muttering how great the higher world is, how great Atzilus is, how great Ein Seif is. And that it's worth to leave all of that behind, to come into this world and serve Hashem physically in this world. That's this Maimed. That's this Maimed. That's a Sapra Chayk. Havaya Amar Alai B'ni Ata Ani Ayem Yilideticha. The bringing of Mashiach down into the physical world is a Sapra Chayk. You add to the Sfiras Alyenas an additional Koyach, but you come down into the lowest world. And that's also the Pshat and the Pasuk Arenu B'layata Sharenu. No. Of Marosh Tzurim Arenu Magvais Ashurenu. The Yidden have a very high source, but that from that high source is Nimshach into this world. What's going to come down, Perikei? So I said to you before, this Maim is a Hemshech to Maim Yud Beis Tammuz. And of course, Yud Beis Tammuz, besides for everything else, is also the Friedik Rebbe's Yemeledes. And in Tovshin Lamed Ches, the Friedik Rebbe turned 98. So he went into his 99th year. It's not to say Kapitel Tzadik Tes. So the Rebbe had a minig to smuggle in from the psukim of that Pedic, right? The Rebbe did it about himself also. Yidalf Nissen, the Rebbe used to sometimes say a Maimer or a Sicha, where some years more than others, most notably Shnas Hashivim, Tavshan Lamed Beis, where he would speak about the psukim of his kapitel, sometimes more overtly and sometimes more b'havla, but he would discuss it. Here the Rebbe is going to analyze psukim from Kapitel Tzadik Tes, Psalm 99, which is the Pedic that the Frierdiker Rebbe entered into. This is what? 42 years ago. Tavshin Lamed Ches. So the Rebbe starts, I want to connect the ideas that we learned today in this Maimed. That Marosh Tzurim Arenu Magvais Ashurenu, but then it has to come down from the Gvois with above, all the way to the lowest worlds, just like you have to have Avram with a Hey, and just like you have to have a Sapir al Chayk. Says the Rebbe, we can connect it also to the Pedic. So Baal HaMaisa Yula, which is also his Maimed of his capital for the year, beginning at Beis Tammuz of Shalom B'Ches. Quote, Ve'ez Melech Mishpat Ohev. You are a king of ois, of power, and Mishpat Ohev, you love judgment. Ata Kenanta Meishadim, you prepared. Meishadim means a pass for the fair, or for the fair themselves. Mishpat and Staka, but Yankev Atasisa, you did Mishpat and Staka in Yankev, in the Jewish people. Now I'm just going to tell you up front the chap, the pasuk. The word Mishpat means judgment. And the word Mishpat also means Torah. Judgment and Torah are almost opposites, because Torah is Gilui Oyer. Torah gives a judgment, but the judgment of Torah is Lichtika. Judgment, on the one hand, is a very unpleasant thing. Like I always say, that the worst thing that can happen to a person is to be judged. even if they're judged favorably. Because when you judge a person, you dissect them. You don't look at the whole person. You don't look at the person's whole life. You look at the actions of the person. You look at specific actions of the person. You press on them like you would on a raw, exposed nerve, and you paint it. So on the surface, mishpat means judgment. Underneath the surface, mishpat means inyan atayr. So the Rebbe says like this. On this pasuk, Eis melech mishpat ohev ata kananta mishara mishpat esaka b'yankavata asisom. It's in Yohaleh, yeah, the Rebbe still. Just based beginning levush, two types of garments. The inner garment is Teda. It's called Lavash ad Hashem Eis. Hashem Eis la'amayit. When the pasuk says Eis melech mishpat ohev, goes on the levush of Teda, which is a levush of which revealed godliness. And Babeis levush achis, the second is a secondary garment, an outer garment, which is the levush of Malchus, which is Hashem Malach Geis Lavish. Lavash ad Hashem Eis. I have a kasha because in the second pasuk, which is the Cheda speaking about the Chetenias garments, he again mentions ois, but he calls this is called levush achitza. Now I'm going to venture to say that levush achitza means mitzvahs. So levush hapnimi is ois, which is Torah. Levush achitza is much lower than that, and I think it means mitzvahs. Hainu beis levush manal. Now, and the Rebbe says, Hainu beis levush manal chitzenius hapnimis. There's a levush pnimi which is called ois, which is Torah. The levush chitzeni which is called mishpat. And when it says in the pasuk ve'eis melech mishpat ohev, it means you want to join together the inner garment, which is Torah, with the outer garment, which is judgment, which is mitzvahs. And he says it's the same thing as we said before, that when you add a vav to the word void, it's nimshach from a higher level to a lower level. When you add hey to the word avram, it adds from a higher level to a lower level. When you add a sapra el chek to malchus, that's from a higher level to a lower level. Similarly, there is ois, which is levush pnimi, and there is mishpat, which is levush chitzeni, and you want to join the two together. You want to bring down into the levush chitzeni of mishpat, levush pnimi, which is Torah. And he says, when we join together the inner garment, which is Torah, and the outer garment, which is mishpat, then you have mishpat that Hashem loves judgment. In other words, lahatzdik es tzadikim, to make tzadikim correct. Now, there's an outer garment which is called mishpat ohev. Hashem judges. There's an inner garment which is called eis melech, Torah. And when you join them together, so the inner garment and the outer garment are connected, and they come down. What is the meaning of the words mishpat ohev? Lahastik es tzadikim, to make tzadikim right. So the Rebbe has a kasha. If you're going to start judging tzaddikim, the meaning of the words lahatzdik es tzaddikim means to make tzaddikim correct. To make tzaddikim correct, you have to judge them. If you have to judge them, you have to expose their faults. L'cha'ira. Says the Rebbe, no. That's what the pasuk finishes with Ata kenanta meisharim. You prepared meisharim. Liyes mishpat tzedakah b'yankiv atasisa. You did mishpat tzedakah b'yankiv. And that affects that even when you're trying to be matzdik as tzedakah, to make the tzaddikim correct, it's done in a way that's favorable for them. If Hashem is going to judge, mishpat ohev, and the judgment is going to be for tzaddikim, they're always going to be judged and found flawed, faulty. Nobody's good enough. But since it says Atakananta Misharim and Mishpat tzedakah b'yankiv atasisa, this means that even when the Eibusha judges, he's still going to judge favorably. Hainu, in other words, the mishpat ohev hainu, the meaning of the words Hashem loves judgment is in the creation. Hashem loves judgment. When Hashem looks at His word, He wants it to be perfect. Turn to page Kuf Shin Ayin Vav. When it comes to the Jewish people, Bnei Yankev Yosef Salo, which is called Bnei Yisrael, Bnei Yisrael Ad Ekev V'Achas Hayam, and Mishpat Tzedakah B'Yankev Atasis, the Eibusha gave us Mishpat Tzedakah to sweeten the judgment. And the meaning of Mishpat is not judgment. The meaning of Mishpat is Torah. So the pasuk begins, Ve'eis melech mishpat ohev. The Eibusha is a king. The Eibusha is a king. That represents Torah. And then the mishpat ohev means that the Eibusha loves to judge. That's the chitzenius de kalavush. And the kavanah is to join the pnimius de kalavush, which is Torah, with the chitzenius de kalavush, which is mishpat, and make them into one. How so? That even though when it comes to the world, it seems like the Eibusha likes to judge, When it comes to Yidden, the judgments of a different type. Why? Because Mishpat is Daka V'Yanka V'Ata Asisa. The Eibishter gave us Mishpat, which is the Torah. And of course, Tzedakah is Tzedakah. And when we learn the Torah, and we do the mitzvahs, the Mishpat is Daka V'Yanka V'Ata Asisa offsets the Mishpat Ohev. This is accomplished with the work that the Jewish people do in 2 Yanim of Mishpat, which is Torah and Tzedakah. Parenthesis, Be'evin Tev L'Shmaim Tev L'Abri, said David is Kvechel good to heaven and to earth. This is an idea that for many, many years never costs us very much. In Huchba Be'ki Tev, Tev L'Shmaim, and Tev L'Abri. So Tev L'Shmaim is Mishpat, which is Torah, and Tev L'Abri is Tzedakah. That's the pshat in the pasuk Tziyim B'Mishpat Yipada V'Shveh B'Tzedakah. The Eibishter gave us 2 ways to go out of goals: Torah and Tzedakah. Torah is the Pnimius, and Tzedakah is the Chitzenius. Skip the bracket. Okay, Amar Adeshem the Eibish, it says Shimru Mishpat Vasu Tzedakah Kevish Wasi Love. When you're not careful about Mishpat and Tzedakah, which means Torah and mitzvahs, Mashiach comes. Skip the parenthesis of Shem Shadei Aveda B'Mishpat and Tzedakah. When a Yid does Aveda of Torah and Tzedakah, now so in the same B'Mishpat Yipad is redeemed. Kach, similarly, Adei Zeh Shem Mishpat Tzedakah B'Yanka Vat Asis. When you're not careful about Torah and Tzedakah, you have the in of Atak and Anta Meisharim. The Eibishter prepares a way for the Meisharim. And there's 2 translations of the word Meisharim. Number 1, Pshara, Hashem Paket, compromises rather than being exacting. And number 2, Anta and Anta Meisharim, that we are Zeichet to the in of Yachad, the Muyasha, Yachad L'Faneimer, that down here, there should be the same Megillah as the mind. So what does the Pasuk say? This is the Pasuk from the Fidik Rebbe's Kapitel, that there is Eiz Melech and Mishpat Tohev. There is Torah and then there's judgment. The avodah is to make the Torah and the judgment into one thing. To make the Torah and the judgment. When you make the Torah into one thing and the judgment into one thing, the judgment becomes sweet. And then you have Mishpat Tzedakah B'Yanka V'Ata Asisa. So even though by Pashtus there's Eiz Melech, that's Torah. Mishpat Oyev, that's his judgment of the world. But when you join the Eiz Melech and the Mishpat Oyev together, and the way you join the Eiz Melech and the Mishpat Oyev together, they're going higher than both of them. Then you're Zeicha that Atak and Anta Meishar and Mishpat Tzedakah V'Yanka V'Ata Asisa, that the Eibush judges us favorably. So again, the constant here is that you're bringing a lakus from a higher level to a lower level. Just like in the first half of this Maimah. Marosh Tzurim and the Yidden come from the highest levels, but it comes down to the lowest levels. Similarly, that Yidden are the Madrega of Mishpat Tzedakah B'Yanka V'Ata Asisa, and therefore they're able to facilitate the fusing together of the Eiz Melech and the Mishpat Oyev that should come one in you. And the Rebbe concludes, the Eiz B'Mizben Anal, in the second paragraph of Beit Shanayim above number 12, further in that same capital it says, actually earlier, Adeshem Molach Yirgzram Yeshiv. One second. Here's my siddur. Yeah, we'll have to guess. The Shem Molach Yirgizu Amim Yeshiv Kruvim Tanut Haaretz. Here it says Tanut Haaretz. It should be Tanut Haaretz. And then of course the 4th pasuk is the Eiz Melech Mishpat Ohev. Atak and Anta Meisharim Mishpat Tzedakah B'Yanka V'Ata Asisa. So and of course, the meaning is that the world is going to be moved by HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Until you're going to say Kadosh Hashem Elokeinu, and this is a Hachana to Mizmah L'Seidah, which is going to be a Gili of the Yasod Lavi. So, the Rebbe says that this pasuk, Ve'ez Melech Mishpat Oyev Atak Anta Meisharim Mishpat Tzedakah B'Yanka V'Ata Asisa, which is the avoid of it to join together the Pnimis, the Levushim, with the Chetzenius, the Levushim. So that Atak Anta Meisharim, and then Mishpat Tzedakah B'Yanka V'Ata Asisa comes down into Talmud Haaretz until Ki Kadosh Hashem Elokeinu and Mizmah L'Seidah. And then it concludes, and then it'll realize all the things that were said in prophecy then that should happen actually now. In Nevuah, by the prophecy end of time. Here he says, if we were Zeicha, if we were Zeicha, it would happen right away. But here he says, here the Rebbe doesn't say, in the beginning of the Maimah, the Rebbe said the reason for the elongation of time is we should make a keli to receive it. Here he says because we did Avedas basically. But now so So now, Tzarech this kind go, then it has to happen in this world in our concept of time. Hainu ayidei zeh shebergo yemachrein because the Mashiach in these last minutes of Golos saves managos besnag and beif intimus hamatim alos and shoyis all yidden behave like they should. Marosh Tzurim and therefore we're going to be zeichet hain levad yishkin, like it says in V'zei sabracha v'yishkin yisol betach bada den yankim. And especially when we add the mishpat and tzedakah, which means teira and tzedakah, and then we add hainu golin. Like it says in the pasuk Tzin, mishpat tzedakah tzedakah, and these days are transformed into yomim tevim. B'yish Mashiach tzedkenu yavav v'yelenu yelechenu k'miyasatzeinu. The Rebbe finishes b'karev mamish, and we're used to saying, of course, the Rebbe says take of miyad. Okay, this is the maimed. Wasn't that difficult? It took me about an hour. Wasn't that difficult to maimed? The nekuda of the maimed is that you didn't have a very, very high source, but higher than that high source is bringing it down to the lowest levels. And the Rebbe connected it to the capital of the Friedrich Rebbe, capital Tzadik test. That's the maimed. Okay. Now, one thing I forgot to say that I want to mention, and that is at the end of the previous paragraph, he mentions that Mizmel Seda has a connection to Mashiach, because it says in Chazal that La'asad Lavi all the Karbanos Abatl except for the Karban Teda. So the Kitz and Nimras, I just wanted to know that the Rebbe says the reason the Karban Teda has a Maila because it has Chometz. And it's also the same idea, because it has Chometz, it represents bringing a Lakusta Klipa, and La'asad Lavi, that's also going to be a Nimra. So now, sometime, somewhere, somehow, I'm going to teach the other class on this Maimed, and in Kamos it's going to be a very small class. We're just going to learn Pei Gimel. But in Eichos, it's, so to speak, it's the Haskalah of this Maimed, it's the scholarship of this Maimed. Why the Rebbe does this? I suppose it's based on whatever Maimed this Maimed is based on. It's hard to know on what Maimed the Rebbe based this Maimed on. But B'chol Leifin, that's the discussion, and we'll do this in Mitzvah Hashem.